Hi guys, in everyone. A it's a welcome to this AMS session. I don't even need to see my face just so that you know who is talking, and I'll just introduce Damilola and then new questions. So, um, my name is Amarachi, as you guys already know, and I will be moderating this session. We have with us Mr. Akapo Damilola. He's a senior consultant at Andela, and he's also. Can everyone hear me, please? I want to be
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
yes, I can
Okay.
hear
Yeah, and he's also a one of the mentors for the Dufuna program. So he currently mentors team. I don't know if any team work here, but he's one of the mentors. Okay, I think we lost him for a bit. But yeah, so
you. Oh, hi, sorry, I got
he will be here to answer whatever questions we have. Tell us a little about himself.
okay.
I'd be glad to take it from here.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Damilola Akapo, senior consultant at Andela. I have worked at a couple of other places before Andela. I was once a senior software engineer at Kutankush, the parent company running the Defuna project. And prior to this current Defuna being run, I did help with a couple of other Defuna related mentorship programs, and I would be talking today about how to stand out as a student developer, which I find to be kind of a very interesting topic because I was initially of the opinion that it was something that was very obvious. But after thinking about it for a while, I realized it might be not be so obvious. So I am going to try and explain uh, how you would stand out as a student developer if that is really what you want to do. So, I don't know, before I start talking for a very long period of time, is there anything anybody would like to ask me? And can you hear me? Also, yeah, that's that question.
Yes, we can hear you, Dami. Thank
Okay, okay, thanks, fine. So, how to stand out as a student developer. First of all, I don't believe there's anything like a student developer. I believe you're developers regardless of whether you're a student or not. You're a developer. You build apps, you write software, you solve problems using programming languages. And so what I'm telling you now would also apply not only as a student developer, but also as just a developer outside of the university, if you so wish. And it applies regardless of what stack you're writing with, what programming language you use, and regardless of anything. As long as you're a software developer, it applies. And I think it also applies regardless of what career line you're working with. So software developer, banker, whatever it is you want to be, I believe it also does apply. And I kind of broke it down into 3 points. I believe those 3 points kind of capture the essence of it. The first point is I believe, as a professional in any field, one of the most important things you can do for yourself is to make it a point to constantly learn. If you make it a point to constantly learn learn best practices, how best to go about solving problems, try and solve problems, you kind of put yourself into a mindset that is not average, and you tend to understand more about things or problems that you might eventually encounter in the process of your career. And being a student, it kind of gives you the unique opportunity of being able to learn while being unshackled from the kind of problems, or let's say circumstances or challenges you might have if you're not a student. Occasionally, I tell people that one of the best places, or like one of the best periods in your life to actually learn things, is when you're in the university, because you have just one mission at that point in your life, which is to acquire as much knowledge as possible. And if you kind of drive yourself into the mindset, into the belief, and into the way of thinking that says constant learning is how you progress in any kind of career path you pick, I believe you would be in a way setting yourself apart and kind of preparing yourself to stand out as a developer. The second point I'm talking about would be to build, practice building, and to solve problems. So basically, it's one thing to learn, it's another thing to know how to apply the knowledge which you've acquired. And I think most of the time people tend to think once you know something, that is the end of it. But that's not usually the case. Most of the time, you need to actually practice and use these things that you've learned. Take, for example, you learn a new algorithm to classify items in a list. If you don't practice this over and over again, you most likely eventually will forget it. That is how the human mind works. The human mind thrives in constant practice. That way, you train your mind to, after a while, treat this thing as a conditioned reflex. Take, for example, you are learning a new way, or you're trying to devise a new algorithm, or there's a particular problem, algorithmic problem you are trying to solve. You might solve it once, say like 6 months ago. And today, if someone asks you about it, you might have a vague idea, but you're more likely to remember things you did yesterday than something you did 6 months ago. So the first point, like I said, is you have to constantly learn new things, best practices as much as you can. And the second thing is to actually apply those things you've learned. Try and build as many pet projects as you can, private projects, if you will. It's actually easier and safer to fail when you build things without being integrated in a kind of fast-paced environment. And I would actually, this is more or less kind of like a heads up. One of the things you would encounter as a software developer working outside of the confines of, say, the university or a not student developer is the software world is kind of very, very fast paced. You like, for example, a new JavaScript framework pops up like every other day, every other week, and you always have to keep abreast of the new information as it comes, new technology as it comes, new knowledge as it comes. And the more you learn of these things, the more you need to actually, in practice, try and use them. Because if you don't, you're just acquiring knowledge you're most likely not going to make any effective use of. So, like again, I would reiterate: the first point is you have to constantly learn. The second one is you actually have to use this knowledge you've acquired. You need to experiment as much as possible. Pick up a pet project. It doesn't have to be something big. It just have to be some. It has to be something that you're comfortable failing with. It's something that you can experiment with as much as possible. You know you're not under any pressure to perform. You can learn at your pace. And the third point, which people talk about a lot, and I'm pretty sure you've heard about, is networking. You need to be able to network with people, software developers, people in the industry, people that you feel like you can actually learn something from. And by the ways you can do this is by meeting people, attending relevant conferences, attending webinars as much as possible, and trying as much as you can to have conversations with people. It's actually a very, very huge world out there in the tech, and there are a lot of concepts that on your own you most likely would not be able to get a full grasp of it. But after being able to talk to people, meet people, you will be able to fully understand it, because people tend to understand things at different paces, and people would always be willing to help. That's one thing I know about the tech community is people are almost always willing to help. And if you find someone who is not willing to help, I'm pretty sure you would eventually find someone else who is going to. So don't let that deter you. So I'm going to go through the 3 points again just to make sure that you see how they all interconnect. First, you need to constantly learn new things. Secondly, you need to actually use those knowledge you've acquired. And the third thing is you need to actually network, because you never know what someone you meet today might, the kind of impact a person might have in your life eventually. A number of people I've met in the course of my career, over time, we got to know each other, and we've been able to help each other at different points in the career. I mean, there are a couple of people who have been able to get internships through me, people who have been able to get jobs through me too. It's not a one-man world out there. And like Done once said, no man is an island, because if we are indeed islands, we would not be able to connect with each other on a much more emotional level. And I believe that networking is one of the key things you also need to consider if you actually want to stand out as a student developer. A couple of other things you should also consider doing is applying for programming competitions. Like take for example, like Google Code Jam, and practicing questions on hacker rank as much as you can. So these things, they kind of put you in a specific mind frame, which makes you very familiar with the world you're kind of entering, which is the world of tech and programmers. If you're familiar with it, you can go as far as possible. So it's not going to be a case where people discuss things and you're totally out of the loop. So when people have conversations, you can actually be able to meaningfully contribute as much as possible and also learn from them in the process. So I'm not someone who likes to speak much, but I believe with those 3 points, I've been able to kind of give you a kind of outline on how you can actually be a developer, a student developer if you want, but a developer that actually stands out, because you need to know your stuff, you need to know your onions. You need to be able to, at any point in time, make decisions as a software developer and be able to stand by it. And one of the ways you can make sensible decisions people can actually, decisions you can stand by is usually when you make it from a place of knowledge. You need information to do that. So the way you become knowledgeable is by constantly learning and constantly practicing and experimenting. So I believe summarily that it kind of encapsulates the whole idea of how you can kind of speed up your career for one, and become a kind of force to reckon with. And I would say it's one of the things that worked for me, because I am someone who started writing code even before I got into the university. So I've had a history of long-term learning. Like every morning I wake up and learn something new. I don't necessarily have to use it at that point, but I always make sure that whatever I learn is directly applicable to whatever problem I'm trying to solve. I work on, practice on, so you don't have to fail on projects that are kind of fast paced. Like I mentioned earlier, if you fail on your personal project, nobody is going to hold you for it. But say there's a technology you're trying to use on a project that's worth billions of naira, billions of dollars, and then you make a mistake, and that costs the company money. It costs people their information. Those are the kind of mistakes, and these are the kind of mistakes that can be avoided if you actually had taken time out to practice on your own and make sure that you have accounted for every point of possible failure and new things you learn. So I think that is basically all I have to say on that. So if you have anything you'd like to ask me with regards to that, I would like to take those questions now.
Thank you. So here are the things I'll just like these are things that I picked out from what you said. I think the first thing that you said that stood out was the fact that you are a developer, like the students in France is like negligible. Yeah, either a developer or you're not to actually work with that mindset that student or not, you're a developer. So these are tips on out as a developer. And he
Mhm.
mentioned three things, which I'm sure you all heard, which the three things: number one, always learn and to pick up pet projects you can work on and you can, like comfortably fill in without losing thousands of dollars and all. Then number three, network, like try to meet new people, interact with people in this space, and get involved in competitions. So at this point, like, do we have any questions that we would like to ask him? Anything that isn't clear or clarifications or anything? So the floor is open now.
I have some questions. I added the questions to the sheet, so probably some.
Okay. Let me check.
Okay, I'll just read out the question then from the sheet. So the
Okay.
first question is if you think you can strive out there as a developer. Nowadays, students tend to drop out of school to push for full-time software developer jobs.
Yeah.
Did you get that?
Okay. The way I would, yes. The way I would answer that is this. There's something my father would always tell: certificate you've earned, nobody can take away from you. And most of the time, people tend to forget that the point of schooling is to actually acquire knowledge. Considering the kind of climate we are in Nigeria, you would at a point kind of get frustrated and feel like your only option is to drop out. But I would advise you not to, for a couple of reasons. One, if there were to be any kind of a case where, okay, they want to hire a developer, here you are, a developer, seasoned, you dropped out of school, but you're actually very, very good. And there's another developer who has a degree but might not actually be as good as you. But the first thing people would notice, or the first thing they would consider, is that degree, most of the time, at least in this kind of climate. Outside of here, yeah, maybe not so much, but then I would still advise you to finish school, because it would not take anything away from you on the long run. It most likely would add more to you than take away from you. I'll give you, this is kind of like a personal example. When I was in my third year, I got a job in a software company in Dubai, and I had the option of dropping out to actually pursue the job. The lady who was trying to recruit me then actually specifically told me not to. While she was impressed with what I could do, she was telling me that she already had a PhD in computer science, and she doesn't think it is advisable for me to drop out to follow a job that way. One thing most people do not understand is the moment you have a job, your learning becomes streamlined. While in school, you can learn as much as you want, but the moment you're on a job, you're learning everything you have to do most of the time is focused and based on that job. Like if let's say you're a mobile developer, the chance you would most likely work with web technologies when you have a job as a mobile developer is quite minimal, except you work at a company where everybody is a jack of all trades. Now, if you drop out of school to pursue full time, that's the thing. It's full time. Like you're meant to dedicate 40 hours a week of your time to it. And if you're dropping out of getting a certificate to go and focus on that, I think you're missing the point. You're jumping hoops you shouldn't jump yet. So I think it's advisable that you actually do finish your degree before you go for a full-time job. Another example I will give is I dropped out of my master's in software engineering degree. And the reason I could comfortably drop out was I had finished all my coursework. I'd finished my MSc project, my thesis, in fact. I'd finished almost every aspect of it. So there was nothing else except just getting that degree. And to be quite honest, I personally, this was a personal decision. It wasn't the best, or let's say the most sensible decision, but it was a personal decision. There were a number of other factors that actually came into play. So today, a number of people think I made a very, very crazy decision. And I agree. I think it's actually a very, very crazy decision. But also, at least, the least you can do is at least finish your bachelor's program, your first degree. Any other thing from that point on, you can figure out your way, but at least finish your bachelor's degree. So I think the second question is how important are tech communities on campus and how do they help you during your time on campus? Tech communities are actually quite important. It would be silly to say they are not, but then they're not the silver bullet. They're just one of those things. The tech community, when I was on campus, I actually was part of running the tech community. So I wouldn't say it actually helped me. It was more like I was helping other people. But now here's the thing: I was helping other people, so people were actually being helped, even if it wasn't me. Personally, I'm not a very big fan of tech communities. I think most of the time they kind of divert attention from things that are much more important, but they are still important regardless. It's like saying how important is water when you're eating. It's what you need: food, you need water, you need to always balance it out. So I would say do not spend a large percentage of your time following the tech community hype. They're quite useful for networking. Like I said earlier on, they're quite useful for networking and exposing you to new ideas. Because most of the time, tech communities are run by people who actually have access to new information, new technologies. So it's good. They expose you, which is very good for you as a developer, because a number of things you probably would not know on your own, and the tech community will be able to help. And there are also people in the community who can also serve as mentors or teach you things you don't know. So they are not unimportant. They're actually quite important. It's just you always have to learn moderation with all things. And the same applies to tech communities.
Thank you very much, Dami.
Yep.
I think what I can pick from what you said is, find a balance. Tech communities
Yes.
are important, but they are not, especially in school, the beginning and the end. But balance, yeah. So thank
Yep.
you, Koinsala, for your question. Do we have any more questions? Umaina, Kumi, ask your questions out loud if you do not want to start typing it, or you just type it in the chat message. So any questions? We'll assume that questions, right?
Mhm. I think I have a
Okay.
question for everybody on the call. What would you say is your most impressive project so far as a developer? Like, what would you say is a project you've worked on that you're proud of and you can actually talk about? And just are there any such projects for any of you guys?
Okay, I think Umaina wants to say something.
Okay.
Uh, oh,
Hello?
hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have one on ground, but I'm actually working on one. It has to do with using Python as a web, using Python language to build a web scraper, then analyzing the data. So I'm still working on it for now. I don't have
Okay.
it on ground.
All right. That makes sense. Anybody else? Anybody else?
That's nice.
Okay, so now the reason why I asked is this. Occasionally, people tend to think it's being a software developer is mostly what you do on the job, but outside of the job, it's actually things you've done on your own. Say you're an interview now for a job as a software developer. I'm giving you a kind of cheat sheet here. You always have to have a project that you've worked on, a project you can talk about, a project that if anybody should ask you why you made this decision on this project, you can actually stand by and be like, oh, yes, I made this decision because of this. I think it's very, very important if you are a developer that is just coming up to actually have your own personal projects you can display. Now, if you're applying for jobs occasionally, they ask for experience and then they say how many years of experience you have. Personal projects also count. They count because they show that outside of your work, you are dedicated enough to actually take time to learn at your own pace, to learn outside of your normal regular time. So it's one of those things you should actually do as a developer to stand out. Have personal projects that are quite useful and you can point to that, yes, I built this. It helps a lot. It really, really does help a lot in terms of your career. So yeah, that's all from me for now. I guess there are no other questions. So unless you want to ask by talking.
Okay. Is it safe to assume that there are no questions? So, Mina, do you have any questions to ask
Yeah,
No.
someone has a question.
for me? Any more questions?
So, I have a question.
Okay.
How important is
Sorry, how important is what?
getting paid as a developer, a student
What?
developer?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you just type? How important is what?
How important is getting paid as a student developer?
How important is getting paid?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the importance depends on what the kind of importance you attach to it. When I was a student working, occasionally there were times when I got paid and there were times when I didn't get paid. It's a factor of the importance you attach to it. If you work and you want to get paid for your job, please push for it. Don't let anything stop you. If you feel like, okay, I deserve to get paid for this, please push for it. And if you feel like money is something you can do without, pick the learning as your takeaway from that project. Because if you're working on a project most of the time, there are two things to pick away from it. The learning, the problems you solve, the knowledge you acquire, and whether you get paid or not. Personally, as an individual, I've gotten to a stage where most of the time I don't really bother much about if I'm getting paid from a project or not. But I know that does not apply to everybody. Some people actually do need the money. So if you need the money and you feel like the money is important to you, please push for it. But if you feel like the money is something you can do about, and the project is actually something you can learn from, then if you feel like okay, you can let go of it, feel free to let go of it. But if the money is important, push for it. So the importance is dependent on the level of importance you attach to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah. Thanks for the response to my question. So I have one question. So
Okay.
I just like to know so far in your journey. Maybe you could just give us some ideas on maybe things you faced at the point that we could learn from, probably difficulty or some of your
Okay.
achievement, and that we could look into.
Okay. I honestly do not know where to start, and I'll tell you a very funny story now. There was a time when I was interviewing with a company, and the guy asked me, "Why do you consider yourself a smart person?" And I could not answer that question. I mean, all my life, I've always known I'm smart, but I've never actually had to vocalize why. So this question you just asked me, I'm going to have to think for like 30 seconds before I answer it because my journey as a software developer is a very long one. Not necessarily all pleasant, a little bit tedious, but let me see where I can start from. So I started writing code when I was kind of like 9. So I was exposed to code quite early. I started with COBOL, Basic, the rudimentaries. And when I got into Obafemi University, I studied computer engineering. And over time, I picked up different languages. I figured out picking up languages wasn't hard for me once I understood how to write and actually think like a programmer. And in the course of years, I have worked at quite a number of companies. I have consulted for quite a number of them too, and I've freelanced a lot. I built the mobile learning platform for National Open University when I was an undergraduate. I won a couple of competitions. ISPON, I think there was ISPON, there was this one that was in Dubai, and a couple of other ones. I tend to lose track of these things. I have been an intern I was an intern for Pace Solutions. That was when I was in my third year, and that I got to pick up a bit of PHP then. Before I graduated, I actually got a job before I graduated. I was working with what was the name of this company then? Yeah, Great Labs. After Great Labs, I did consult a bit for Abzone, which is actually like a finance institution here in Nigeria, actually quite big. I ran their mobile engineering team for a bit. After that, I joined Kuta Kush, where I was a senior software engineer for a bit. And I did build quite a number of products at Candy, Red Cheetah, FBN. They did quite a number of products actually. I've built so many different products. I actually have lost count, and every other project is just so and so to me these days. So currently, I am at Andela, and I'm senior consultant on behalf of Andela for a couple of clients outside of Nigeria. And one of my clients is called Ragnar Events, and I'm the lead mobile engineer there. And we have products that I think close to over 500,000 people use on whatever they have to. So I have encountered quite a number of things in the line of my career. Bad code. I have written quite a number of bad code myself. But like I said earlier on, one of the most important things you need to learn as a software developer is you need to constantly learn. Make mistakes. If you're lucky, make mistakes very early on in life, very early on in your career, and then learn from them and learn to actually know when you're about to make a mistake. So I have done quite a few impressive things in life, not most of which I can remember, but I have built a number of things. I have built a number of things. I mean, I've built stuff so much. Most of the time, when I have to build something new, I'm basically just borrowing code from something I've built before. I've worked with engineers from different companies on different projects, engineers from Konga, from Google, and I am kind of like a very versatile person, but most of the time I tend to focus mostly on mobile technologies. I have a couple of companies of my own that actually doing quite fine and making revenue. Although I don't like being in management positions. I just prefer to write code and solve problems. So that's just me as an individual. If there is one lesson I would take away from my whole life and just distill into a single sentence, it would be, well, keep learning. And if you're going to fail, fail fast and don't give up. It's fine to get tired. When you get tired, take time off, go and rest, and then get back at it. If I tell you you're not going to get tired, if I tell you you're not going to get frustrated, I would be lying, because I've had moments like that where I'm tired, frustrated. I feel like I don't want to do this shit anymore. But it's human nature. You just have to persevere. And if after a while you then decide that probably software engineering is not for you, writing code is not for you, you can always explore other career options in the tech world. So there is always that. So yeah, so that's basically me in short words.
Okay, one question again.
Yeah.
As a student developer, what are the things that you should do to like? Are there like a list of things that you advise the students to, like guidelines to follow to have a good academic?
Well, it's actually quite simple. Most of the time, you just need to ask yourself, what direction is what direction is the industry facing right now? And I think, for example, currently, I think there's a lot of hype around machine learning, artificial intelligence. It's always good to have an idea of what those things are. So let those kind of things guide your acquiring knowledge. But just to be on the safer side, it would be better if you actually then looked historically and then looked at, okay, which of these lines has always been consistent? So if I need a job, or something, which of these technologies would actually make sense to me to work on? So you can learn technologies like that and put it in mind that you want to actually work with technologies like that, but do not never ever focus on just one technology without actually exploring others. You need to be agnostic about learning. You cannot, you don't be religious about it. Be agnostic about it. Everything goes, anything goes. Like I'm someone who can easily switch between languages. I've written JavaScript, written Ruby, written Python, written Java, Swift, C, C++, as many languages as possible. And I can tell you one thing: every language has its advantage and its disadvantage. They have their peculiarities, but you also have to learn as a developer that you use whatever solves the problem. So if anybody asks you, um, what is your preference in solving this particular problem, it always has to be whatever solves the problem. Like now, you would not build a web app using the Android framework. That doesn't make sense. But if you wanted to build a mobile app, a simple mobile app that works across as many devices as possible, you might decide to go for React Native or any of those hybrid solutions. So you always have to keep that in mind, that there is what the industry is tending towards. Whatever technology the industry is tending towards, it's always a good idea to at least have a knowledge of it. And whatever you want to make a career out of, it's also a very, very good idea to actually learn that and learn it very, very well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I have one last question about. So there is, I know it's important for beginners to learn the basics,
Mhm.
but I sometimes I feel when you spend too much time learning the basics and when you actually work on real projects, you have to use libraries so that you can move fast. Now, so how
Mhm.
long should you spend learning the basics, and when should you start using frameworks and libraries?
It works. Learn the basics enough that you're comfortable with them. Learn the basics enough that you're comfortable with them. And use libraries when it would actually significantly cut down on development time. Like now, take for example, it would not make sense for you to start writing a network abstraction on Android when there are libraries that can easily do it, like Retrofit, Iron, or any of those networking libraries. Because if you wanted to build a networking library yourself from scratch, you would have to consider a number of things, a number of constraints, a number of scenarios that these libraries have already dealt with and abstracted. So it's a simple theory of never reinventing the wheel. Like it doesn't you can't reinvent the wheel. It doesn't make sense. So the basics are actually things you should have learned from your undergraduate years. But the way, like I said, the way the Nigerian climate is structured, you most likely wouldn't have. But the basics I even think you always learn. You relearn them every single morning. Every single morning you wake up, you have a problem. You ask yourself, what is the best data structure to handle this? That's one of the basics. One of the basics in software engineering, knowing how best to apply data structures to solving problems. So it's not the basics are not things that you learn and then it just sticks and then you forget it. No, you learn, you relearn them, you read them over and over again. So until they actually become very part and parcel of you, and then you can just work with them without having to think about it. So I would say the basics are important. Learn them enough that until you're comfortable with them. When you're comfortable with them, and for libraries, it's always a thing of is this going to cut down on development time? You get it? Is it going to cut down on development time? And you always have to factor the project, the kind of company, the time, the budget, and everything you have to work with. So, and also maintainability. So you don't just use libraries willy-nilly because most of the time, most of these libraries are not maintained. So, and then if you use a library that is not maintained, then after like 2 months, the library breaks and you can't use it anymore. Now that is a technical debt you have to deal with. So I would advise learn the basics and become familiar with them as much as possible until they become like second nature to you. And for libraries, it's as the problem or the situation demands.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Think of myself as a student, like as a scholar, theoretical being shared, and then people may get bored or like their morale just gets low as per they're just and then as is how do you get project you find projects to work on
How do you find? How do you,
that you can use to develop your skills and what you're learning. How do you
okay.
find projects
Well, I would say
and how do you work on?
either you run into problems or you create problems for yourself. One of the two. Or you come across a problem, you feel like, okay, I can actually solve this using code. It's very important to always remember that not everything can be solved with tech. So if you run into a problem that can be solved with tech and you actually feel like, okay, this is something I can work with, please go on ahead. I have worked on projects like pet projects that eventually became a thing that got integrated into much more larger projects. And these are just projects I worked on like on my spare time. There was a time when I built a software for tracking people's location using their devices. And I was having a conversation with the software engineer on my last trip in Salt Lake, and it was like a company quoted that similar feature for them to the tune of something around like 120,000 US dollars. And this was something I hacked together in like 6 hours. Yeah. So, and it would be easy for me to implement something of that nature inside another project because I already have the experience. I have touched it before. And on the subject of losing morale, I would say this: it is fine if you lose morale. It is fine. It is fine when that happens. We are humans. We're all human beings. But occasionally, you have to ask yourself if a drop in morale is all it takes for me to stop trying to be a better version of myself, to stop trying to be a better developer, then you really need to reassess the things you actually consider to be important to you. Now, I'm not saying it's a do or die affair, but I am always of the belief that if you're going to do something, you either go all out or you don't bother at all. Because if you are going to do anything, it has to be your best work as much as possible. So when you lose morale, it's fine. Like I said earlier on, take a break. Go and watch fishes swim, uh, listen to music, play games, hang out with family, friends, and everything. But know that it is not something you cannot solve. If it's a problem that is making you lose morale, it is not a problem that you cannot solve. It's just going to take a little bit more time, a little bit more thinking than you believe. And to the subject of finding projects, there are projects everywhere. Like sometimes you wake up in the morning and an idea occurs to you, jot it down somewhere and start working on it as soon as you can. I've been in cases where I was just sitting down, something occurred to me, and then I hacked something together, and I got it working, and it always feels good when you pick something from scratch and you build it into completion. It always feels good. So they always try and take joy in moments of small victories, moments of small victories. Take joy in them because it's very, very important. So try to use moments of small victories to kind of offset when you feel demoralized. As a software engineer, you will feel demoralized a lot. Let me just tell you now. Occasionally, I joke and tell people that being a software engineer is like a sinusoidal wave. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. It's like a very, very rough ride. But there are also moments. There are also moments when it feels like you're the smartest person alive. Live for those moments. Just live for those moments. So try not to lose morale as much as possible. And when you do, take a break. Nobody's going to die. You probably don't even have a deadline. So don't be too hard on yourself. Take a break and get back on track.
Thank you very much, Yami.
Yep.
Do we still have any more questions, please?
Yeah. So I have one question, like the last one. So this one is not related to students. It's just something I like to know about when you have been working as a developer for a long time. So
Mhm.
I think after a while, you probably get like a routine Monday to Friday. You know, you have to go to work and probably write code and do some other
Mhm.
stuff. So how important is life outside work on weekends and other days?
Very, very important. Very, very important. So I would not stress this enough. Like at this point in my life, I don't even work on weekends. There is nothing. Like I honestly do not care. The world might be burning, people might be dying, but I would not work on a weekend. Except it is, I don't even see the except because you need to be able to balance out, and most of the time you spend the whole week working, even working extra hours sometimes. If you cannot have the weekend to yourself to decompress, eventually you would suffer a burnout. It happens a lot as developers. When you work for a long period, extended period of time, you just start noticing you're losing interest in your job, you're getting depressed, you're feeling off. It happens. So life after outside of work is very, very, very important. Like very, 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 very important. So you always have to make sure you have a life outside of work. Now, I wouldn't use myself as a very good example because I'm not much of an extroverted person to begin with, but I always make sure that at least I have my weekends to myself. And whatever problem you can't solve on Friday, we'll all meet on Monday and solve it. So life is not that hard. It shouldn't be that difficult. So always let your life also be important. Work is important, yeah, sure, but your life, your well-being, your mental well-being, your physical well-being, emotional well-being is also very important as well. So life outside work is very, 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 very important, and it's one of the things you should actually put on a place of very high priority.
Thanks.
So I guess that's all the questions you guys have for me. So if there's nothing else, I don't know where to go from now. Miss Stefana, can you please?
Thank you very much for your time in explaining things and your patience with our questions and explaining
We lost her for a bit there.
the appreciate. Yeah, thank you very much for your time. For everybody, thank you everybody that tuned in. Thank you, Humaina. Thank you, Konsola. Thank you, Akinkumi, for for your time. I hope we picked one or two things and we had our questions answered in this session. It's also recorded, so after this, you can still access the talk on YouTube. I will share the link on the general channel in case you need to go back to refresh your mind on something or anything else. So, in the absence of nothing else to discuss, we will bring this session to an end here. So, thank you again, Dami, and to the rest of us, we will catch up on Slack.
All right,
Bye.
all
All
right,
right.
guys.
Good night.
All right, bye.
Bye.